As soon as we hit the door, my two brothers, Bill and Punch, sitting in the front row. They bought the candy. We don't need nothing more. I love a movie show, I tell you, in black and white. I don't care what it is. I don't care how small the theater is. I don't care who's playing. I don't care as long as they got popcorn and candy bars. Butterfly McQueen, she's gone with the wind. I love the film of Anthony Quinn.
Good evening, one and all. It's Public Radio KCBX, broadcasting from San Luis Obispo, California, and you've landed on the movie show Take Two. And a very interesting scattershot show tonight. Across the aisle from me, my great friend, it is Bob Whiteford.
And across the aisle from me, the incomparable Jim Dee. And tonight, we've got our Take 4 segment. Jim picked 4 of his favorites. I picked 4 of my favorites, at least what I'm watching right now. And we're going to bring it out there. This is going to be fun, Jimmy.
We've done this one other time before, and probably the idea behind the show is the opportunity to talk about certain films. We could probably group some of these films into the context of another subject, or I know that, at least on my list, with a science fiction classic, a couple of quirky films, as well as a film that's getting released right now into movie theaters. We're brushing with broad strokes, as we say. But I think it's good to emphasize, Bob, these films may not be on our top 10. Maybe they could be. They're just 4 films that we really like and that we want to share with our listeners. There's no real thread going through any of them other than the fact that we picked them. So just an opportunity to talk about some films that we like with no real central theme, just to have some fun with some films that we kind of dig.
Well, kicking it off, Jimmy, with a movie that for some reason I always have a lot of fun watching. And I've seen this film, well, probably all these movies that I'm talking about, probably, I don't know, dozens of times, maybe 30, 40 times. Lately it's like, hey, the economy's bad, the news is bad, everything is bad, including sometimes some of the newer movies. So I don't have cable, and when times like this hit, I tend to go back to a tried and true. Call me a celluloid conservative, but that's the way it is. And the first film that I want to talk about is 1951's Operation Pacific with John Wayne, Ward Bond, Patricia Neal, Philip Carey. Oh, my goodness. It's just Martin Milner. It's loaded with people. And 1951, a very good year for submarine movies, if you're so inclined. Bill Holden in Submarine Command, reunited with his love interest from Sunset Boulevard, Nancy Olson, and, of course, William Bendix. This film, for whatever reason, always had an appeal for me. I don't know why, Jim, but from Max Steiner's opening score with the Warner Brothers shield to the flag-waving, kissing the gal on the dock ending. This film has always entertained me. It's pure hokum. I'm not claiming that this is some, Passion of Joan of Arc, a lost classic. It's not. But this film has a certain appeal to me. It's got all the action stars of that time at the top of the game. It's a fast-paced script. It's well directed by George Wagner, who directed such classics as Man-Made Monster with Lon Chaney and Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. He got a sabbatical from Universal Horror to make this submarine programmer at Warner Brothers. It's got action. It's got comedy. It's got romance. It's got it all. And it's got a little bit of, sentimentality. And for my money, it probably has the most iconic Duke Wayne scene in cinema history. If you were to pick probably about 1:10 of what's John Wayne to you in films, I'd pick this scene we're about to play, and I'll set it up for you. He's taken command of the sub after Ward Bond has been killed. Their torpedoes don't work, and they've surfaced, and they're engaging a Japanese Q-boat. And a Q-boat it looks like a freighter, and it lures submarines to the surface, and then they find out it's heavily armed. So they're slugging it out on the high seas, and the Duke decides to go in with guns blazing and take out this ship. And you know what? To me, I dug the adrenaline rush. I'm excited and laughing at it at the same time, which means basically I'm thoroughly entertained. I might add, the underscore of this film, which is artistically brilliant, is Max Steiner's score. His music to this film is fantastic, and I would love to hear a soundtrack to it someday. But, Hank, if you will, let's go take a little submarine ride with the Duke in Operation Pacific. Boy, that's a Take-Two record. I don't think we've ever heard that many gunshots, machine gun, cannon fire, and explosions in one segment on Take-Two. And we have Operation Pacific with John Wayne to thank for that. My first pick of the night.
I love it, Bob. I like your whole your whole enthusiasm about it too.
I wonder if my sanity needs to be questioned. I'm a little too enthusiastic tonight.
I like it. You're jumping out of your seat. Okay. To continue our take 4, each of us picking 4 movies that we like, I'm going to pick a film called Proof, and I want to make sure that you're not confusing this with a film that was released just a few years back with Gwyneth Paltrow and Anthony Hopkins called Proof. Now, this goes back to 1992. It's a film from Australia, and what I really like about this film, it's one of the many films that you can see the early careers of some Australian stars who have really, come a long, long way since the early 90s. In Proof, the stars are Russell Crowe and Hugo Weaving. Russell Crowe, I think we all know, has become a huge star in this country, even though his roots are in Australia. Hugo Weaving is more of a character actor, although he's really been in a lot of things. I mean, still in Australia, Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, but he's the bad guy in multiples in the Matrix series. He was also in The Lord of the Rings. Very chiseled features, but a really great actor. And the reason I go to this film, Bob, is it does show sort of the early years of these Australian stars where they were really cutting their teeth in some great Australian cinema. And of course, when they got to these shores, they really came on strong and have become big stars. So the film is Proof. Russell Crowe and Hugo Weaving in this scene. And the key to this film, too, it's a wonderful character study. Plus, it won the equivalent of the Australian Academy Award for Best Picture back in 1992. Here's the twist of this film. Hugo Weaving is blind, and he doesn't trust anyone. He's had kind of a tough upbringing. He's looking for someone who he can trust, and he sort of slowly tries to trust Russell Crowe. What he does, because he is blind, is trying to find a way to document his life or find truth in his life. And what he does is he takes pictures, and then he has someone describe the picture to him. He writes in Braille what it is and puts it on the back of the picture. And it's more like a way to find truth for a blind person. It's also a very interesting way to validate your existence. I mean, you don't see anything, you're blind, but you have this collection of photographs that are kind of real because you can read the Braille on the back and say, well, this actually happened. So fascinating character study. Here's a scene from the Australian film Proof. This is a very young Russell Crowe and Hugo Weaving.
Who's that in the photograph?
Which photograph?
The old one on the mantelpiece.
Oh. How'd you know it's old?
Looks old. Black and white. The lady in it's got old-fashioned clothes on. Is that your mum?
Yes.
Is the kid you?
I was supposed to.
You ever seen your own mum? You want me to describe it to you?
All right.
She doesn't look like you.
Oh, really? People always said she did.
Nah, they're probably just saying that. Looks like, the two of you are in a park. You're sitting down, she's got her arms around you. You're sort of looking away. She's got long white fingers, like a statue, you know? She looks young, maybe 28, 29. Got long dark hair, it's falling around her shoulders. She's very pale. And you? You're covered with freckles and your hair's short.
She always cut it herself. Never went to a barber. Never went out with my mother at all. She was embarrassed by me, you see. She always wanted an ordinary child that she could do ordinary things with. And she got me.
It's the voice of Russell Crowe and Hugo Weaving. It's from the Australian film Proof from 1992. I highly recommend this rather obscure film. It had sort of a quick run here in the United States just because of the awards that it won back in Australia. But again, seeing these stars, I mean, they look like they're in their early 20s, Bob. I mean, they look really young, and, Russell Crowe hasn't gotten that more of a gruff voice. He sounds like, almost a teenager. But it's always, for me, it's fascinating to see many of these stars who have really come into their own and looking at the beginnings in some of the Australian cinema, and it's really great stuff to look back to. So, number one on my 4 of individual films tonight on Take Two is the Australian film Proof from 1992.
I got to check that out. That's a great clip. I'm very intrigued, Jimmy.
Oh, we'll have to have you see that. And I have to check out, all of the ones that you're...
maybe not.
Oh, we're having fun.
Well, number 2 on my list, I'm returning to the South Pacific in World War II. And yes, once again, this film is made in 1951. RKO Radio Pictures. Howard Hughes presents a film directed by Nicholas Ray. And we know what a great cult filmmaker Nicholas Ray is. Rebel Without a Cause, Bigger Than Life, 55 Days at Peking. This isn't one of them. And I got to say, when I tell you the title, you'll go, yeah. What's with Bob tonight? The film I'm talking about is Flying Leathernecks, and it's with Big John Wayne and just as big and tough Robert Ryan. And this film has always occupied a very special place in my heart. I first saw this movie the morning when we will leave, my family, my mom and my sister and myself were leaving for England for the first time, summer of 1966. The Met game had been rained out, and as was the case back in those days, they would play a movie. Because on the East Coast, games get rained out a lot, not like out here. So they played an old movie, and while I'm kind of sweating it out, waiting for the taxi to take us to the airport because my dad was working, I'm watching Flying Leathernecks, and I'm scared. I've never flown before. I'm going to a place I've never been. I'm going to see people I don't know, and I'm kind of excited at the same time. That kind of planted the seed, and the film, I still watch it. In fact, I'll tell you another short story. I'll make it brief. I was watching National Treasure 2. I'm trying to explore, get out there and see, what people are watching. I watched about 25 minutes of this movie, and there's a computer geek character in it who has all these stupid lines, like someone's brokenhearted over his girl. Nick Cage is brokenhearted over his girlfriend leaving him, and he says, "Get a dog," or then something else, "Get over it." Like these stupid lines. And I'm thinking, you know what? I pulled it out. I scaled that thing across the room. What a piece of crap. It's like, I need something I can sink my teeth into. And I'm thinking, what better than Flying Leathernecks? You got Duke Wayne and Robert Ryan, and they're going to go toe-to-toe and fight the Japanese at the same time on a Hollywood backlot. Who could ask for anything more? Great archival footage. You've got Don Taylor wearing cowboy boots. You've got J.C. flipping. The film's got... It's a piece of junk, but I've always enjoyed it. And basically for one scene in particular, and I'll have Hank play that in 1 second. I'll set it up. John Wayne's the new squadron commander. He's tough as nails, and he's by the book. Imagine that. Real casting there. And Robert Ryan is his second in command. He's a tough guy, but everybody likes him. He cares about the men openly. I mean, the Duke cares too. He just doesn't make an issue of showing he cares. But Robert Ryan is the people's choice, so to speak. They've been knocking heads ever since Pearl Harbor. Now they're at Guadalcanal, and things are getting rough, and guys are getting killed. And they're going to have it out over how the squadrons run.
That's a milk run. Let's switch it.
No, send the replacements on the milk run. The older guys have had some ground strike experience.
They've also had it tougher than the law allows.
That they have. But I didn't make the rules, I only lived by them. Maybe I did make one mistake. You ought to go with a bomber group. That'd give them a commander who understands combat, give you a little command experience. Pick out one of the replacements to take your place on the ground strike.
Well, let's see. I haven't got any training reports on these guys yet. I don't know which one of them's had the most air support training. Let's leave it the way it is. I'll fly the ground strike with you.
Sure, you'll fly the ground strike with us. You beef at the decisions I make, but you're too soft to make them yourself. You just can't bring yourself to point your finger at a guy and say, go get killed. You gotta tear your guts out worrying about his flight record. Or because some dame back in the States is giving him the brush off. Or whether he knows whether his baby's born yet or not. You got enough troubles of your own for one, man. Stop trying to pack everybody else's around. Schedule that mission.
Roger. I got a belly full of you. And I'm not buying the bill of goods you're selling. In my book, it's easy to be a turtle. Put a shell between yourself and the rest of humanity. Maybe I'm not making my point clear. 400 years ago, a poet said it better than I ever could. No man is an island. When the funeral bell rings, it isn't just for the dead guy. It's a little bit for all of us. Each man's suffering belongs to everyone. Or else why are we shooting off these guns? And I don't know what your reaction's going to be, but here's what I hope it is. I hope you'll say, let's take off these insignia and step out in the boondocks and get it settled.
Major, you're wanted at General Headquarters right away, sir.
Boy, that's a fight I would have paid big money to see.
I got to see this film, Bob. I just listening to that clip. I just, it's who stands up to the Duke, Robert Ryan.
Robert
Ryan. Sounds like
Ryan.
he's holding firm.
Well, you know what's interesting about this, Jimmy? One, I mean, in real life, would this have happened? No. But I think whoever wrote it was in that situation, and this is what they wish they could have said. And two, a kind of an interesting thing, the poet that's talking about no man is an island and turtle shells and using metaphors, Robert Ryan, he was a real Marine. And the tough, gruff guy, well, he wasn't in real life. But that aside, this is a lot of fun. And boy, they don't write movies like that anymore.
Well, no, and hearing those performances, I got to see the film. So once again, your number 2 is
Flying Leathernecks from 1951, starring Big John Wayne and equally big Robert Ryan, directed by Nicholas Ray, produced by Howard Hughes. A real kind of B classic.
Well, Bob, this is interesting because in picking our films, now we should let our listeners know that we didn't tell each other what we were going to come in with tonight. And the fact that Flying Leathernecks was made in 1951, my next film is kind of maybe an obvious choice. It's one of the classic science fiction films of all time, but it also was made in 1951. And there's a reason for me to pick The Day the Earth Stood Still, directed by Robert Wise, has Patricia Neal, has the great Michael Rennie, is, I think what prompted me, Bob, was the fact that there is a remake in the works. Oh. Actually, it was the summer of 2008 when it was going to be released. Now it's pushed back to Christmas. I actually went online and looked at the preview. It doesn't seem to resemble the original. I'm just looking at the trailer. I don't know how much of the story is going to be taken from the original, but I think the reason, Bob, I want to do this is the fact that with this new film coming out, I just want to make sure that our listeners see the original. The Day the Earth Stood Still is easily one of the greatest science fiction films of all time, and it holds up extremely well. In fact, the clip I'm going to play for you is near the end of the film, and it sort of answers the question of why Klaatu is here. And it's not going to ruin the film for you at all, because I think what really makes this film timeless, is looking at the human condition in what happens when an alien force comes, whether it's from another planet or from the same planet. There is a scene when Klaatu comes to Earth. He wants to meet with all the politicians, all the world leaders, and the guy says, hey, we don't get along. You think we can get all the world leaders at one table? Well, things haven't changed too much in, 57 years. And there's another scene where the press is, trying to get the most sensational reaction to this flying saucer that's sitting over in Washington. And as soon as Michael Rennie is interviewed, talking about, well, it's not too good to have hysteria in the place of reason. And of course, he's just shut down completely. I mean, when he starts talking the truth in a cool and calm way, the press just goes, get out of here. I want to hear a woman screaming or something. So there are things in this movie that seem to be so true in 1951, but they're so true now. And it's that richness of this film, of the human condition, that makes this a great movie in and of itself, whether or not it's science fiction or not. The science fiction elements, too, hold up great. Gort, the robot, is still a real scary robot in the film. Michael Rennie says that Gort could destroy the entire world, and you believe him. And you see this thing, and I believe him.
Oh, it's incredibly formidable.
Yes.
Even now, I mean, a lot of times you look at older films and see the special effects, and a lot of folks tend to laugh at them. No, Gort still packs quite a wallop. He's very impressive.
Here is Michael Rennie as Klaatu, and this is from the 1951 classic, The Day the Earth Stood Still.
I am leaving soon, and you will forgive me if I speak bluntly. The universe grows smaller every day, and the threat of aggression by any group, anywhere, can no longer be tolerated. There must be security for all, or no one is secure. Now, this does not mean giving up any freedom, except the freedom to act irresponsibly. Your ancestors knew this when they made laws to govern themselves and hired policemen to enforce them. We of the other planets have long accepted this principle. We have an organization for the mutual protection of all planets and for the complete elimination of aggression. The test of any such higher authority is, of course, the police force that supports it. For our policemen, we created a race of robots. Their function is to patrol the planets in spaceships like this one and preserve the peace. In matters of aggression, we have given them absolute power over us. This power cannot be revoked. At the first sign of violence, they act automatically against the aggressor. The penalty for provoking their action is too terrible to risk. The result is we live in peace, without arms or armies, secure in the knowledge that we are free from aggression and war, free to pursue more profitable enterprises. We do not pretend to have achieved perfection, but we do have a system, and it works. I came here to give you these facts. It is no concern of ours how you run your own planet. But if you threaten to extend your violence, this Earth of yours will be reduced to a burned-out cinder. Your choice is simple. Join us and live in peace, or pursue your present course and face obliteration. We shall be waiting for your answer. The decision rests with you.
The great voice of Michael Rennie is Klaatu from the 1951 sci-fi classic, The Day the Earth Stood Still. Bob, as I listen to that clip too, there are not many science fiction films that have speeches like that. It's usually, when we're talking about other planets, is usually an invasion and therefore a war goes on. And here we have an invasion, so to speak, telling us that we need to live in peace and get rid of our warlike ways. And very unique, and still holds up. I can guarantee if you take a look at The Day the Earth Stood Still from 1951, it's still as fresh as it was when it came out. And please, folks, if you plan on seeing the remake, which comes out in late 2008, do yourself a favor, see the original first. My number 2 pick on Take 4 tonight, The Day the Earth Stood Still, directed by the great Robert Wise.
Who, incidentally, a King Vidor Award winner, like my buddy over here. I just had to say that.
We're having a good time tonight,
This
aren't
is
we?
fun. I'm really enjoying this. I don't even know we're on the radio. Gosh, Hank, I hope I don't cuss.
You're in tune with Public Radio, KCBX and KCBX HD1 San Luis Obispo, KSBX Santa Barbara. We are streaming worldwide at kcbx.org. Back with the rest of Take 4 in just about a moment. Stick with us. We'll be back in a moment.
You're listening to Take 2 on Public Radio, KCBX San Luis Obispo, KSBX Santa Barbara. Streaming at kcbx.org. And you can write to us at movies@kcbx.org.
We're back on Take 2, the movie program on Public Radio KCBX, and we're glad you're there. The ground rules tonight, no ground rules. It's called Take 4. Bob and I each picking 4 films that we either really like, we really love, we want to bring to your attention, and perhaps maybe on our top 10 list if such a thing exists. So we're just bringing up some films that we'd like to share with you, and I think we're moving on to Bob's number 3.
Well, you know, Jimmy, I got to say, that is some great music. I don't know about the guy who's talking. I think he's a bit of a yo-yo, but boy, that's some great music.
You know, we should tell our listeners who listen to the program, that's the Budos Band with some great groups from their first album, and then our movie show song is by Olu Dara, what we opened up the program and play quite a bit on this program since it fits it like a glove.
Tells it like it is. Crazy. Well, here's my third pick, Jimmy. And this is a movie we talked about on the show a while back. And I'm talking about 1965's Spy That Came In From the Cold. I find this film, I love coming back to this film because I see something different every time. Every time, well, life we learn. You know, you think you got everything figured out, and I think that's the beauty of it and the heartbreak of it at the same time. You know, you're still learning. Your eyes are still open, and things you think you got it sussed, and then you realize you don't, which is initially shocking, and then almost a relief. It's like revitalizing. This film is always that for me because it's shot in black and white. It's a spy picture, and unlike my other 2 films that I talked about, it's not black and white. It's so many shades of gray. It's so wonderfully rich and complex. Richard Burton, probably one of his greatest acting jobs. Also, it's worth mentioning Claire Bloom is fantastic in this as the young idealist. Oscar Werner, one of the greatest actors of all time, is fantastic as the East German counterintelligence wizard named Fiedler, who is technically Richard Burton's enemy, but probably a person who he could really relate to and respect and actually like. And then you've got the great character actor Peter Van Eyck playing Munt, the ex-Nazi turned East German Stasi killer who is actually a British agent. I mean, the whole film is so convoluted, but it works. Some films get convoluted and just go out into the ether, the cinematic ether. This film doesn't. It's more intriguing every time you see it. It was written by John le Carré, the great spy novelist, directed by Martin Ritt, who had been blacklisted for many years, and this was part of his return to Hollywood. And this is a great film. I have a little clip here where Richard Burton, with the help of the vile enemy Munt, the Nazi, escapes an East German prison with his young, ban-the-bomb, idealistic girlfriend, Claire Bloom, I like her in that 60s haircut. She's pretty hot. And they're making an escape in some junky East German car heading for the border. And she is a total neophyte as to what's just happened. And he knows all too well what's happened.
You and Munt are enemies, aren't you? What bargain did you make with him, Alec? What's going to happen to Fiedler?
He'll be shot.
Why didn't they shoot you? You conspired with Fiedler against Munt. You said so in court. Why did Munt let you go?
All right, I'll tell you. I'll tell you what you were never to know. Munt is London's man. He's their agent. They bought him while he was in England. We're witnessing the lousy end to a filthy, lousy operation to save Munt's skin. To save him from a clever little Jew in Munt's own department who'd begun to suspect the truth. London made us kill him. Kill the Jew. Now you know. God help us both.
You can really feel the self-loathing in his voice. He absolutely hates and despises what he's done because he's spent a lot of time with Fiedler. When his phony defection, he's with Fiedler for a long period of time. He not only admires him, he likes him, and he's just sentenced him to death to protect someone he despises who is actually on his side. And that, Jim, there isn't a lot of actors that could pull this off so convincingly. I hate to think of the day someone tries to remake this film because they're going to miss the mark by a country mile. This, okay, it's dated, it's a time capsule of the Cold War, but I think the ambiguity of right and wrong and good and evil and all the shades in between are very much with us today. And we're all kind of, in one form or another, sharing Alec Leamas's moral dilemmas. And Alec Leamas is Richard Burton's character.
And we're talking about The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. Bob, when we did our two-part spy movie show, I should say. We talked about the fun stuff, the spoofs like the Our Man Flint and
which are a gas.
They're great.
I love them.
And then we got more into the serious. And even though we got into the James Bond area, I specifically remember seeing this film again when we did the show. And I still think this is as timeless as you're saying it is because, we still have the James Bond character with us, and he's still, he's got the license to kill, and he is, as much as we love James Bond, he kind of, I've always thought he had a little bit of sadism in him. He could kill somebody, and sure, he's the enemy, but he'd come up with some wisecrack. What I loved about The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, and I remember playing some other clips from it too, and remembering the film itself, how Richard Burton hates the job and just thinks it's one of the lowest jobs you can ever have, spying. And, it's just, and of course, with that Richard Burton persona and voice, just talking about how lowly this job is. I mean, this movie takes the whole secret agent thing and turns it on its ear.
A funny side note to this, Jim, is that Bernard Lee, the wonderful British actor who played M in all the Bond movies, plays a grocery clerk in this film, and Burton, while loaded on black and white scotch, proceeds to pound him into a pulp in order to get himself thrown in jail. I kind of liked it. It was a nice touch.
So your film number 3,
Spy That Came In From the Cold.
Love it. That's a great one, Bob. Well, moving along with our 4 movies we want to bring to your attention on Take Two's edition of Take 4, the Take 4 edition of Take Two, I should say. Bob, I wanted to go back to this film, and I was worried that I wouldn't like it as much as I did when I saw it. And I'm talking about John Dahl's Red Rock West. It stars Nicolas Cage, Lara Flynn Boyle, a very scary Dennis Hopper, which he's pretty good at, and J.T. Walsh, who is a really great character actor. If you don't picture him, you've seen him a million times, but he's a kind of a sleazy bar owner sheriff in Red Rock. Bob, I went back and watched this movie. I actually watched it with my daughter, and I just got the biggest kick out of it. It held up really well. It's kind of a neo-noir, but it also moves at a clip. There are so many twists and turns in this movie, and it's what I really like at the center of this film is the Nicolas Cage character. You mentioned Nicolas Cage before. You don't want to see him in National Treasure, but you want to see him in Red Rock West.
I couldn't agree with you more, Jimmy. He's terrific in this.
He really is, and what I love about this film is the first, say, 20 minutes, they really establish that the Nicolas Cage character is a straight shooter. He will not lie to you. He will not deceive you. At the beginning, he applies for a job, and he has kind of a bum leg, and he writes that on the application. And his friend, he's going to try to work in an oil rig. And his friend says, "What you put it down in about your leg?" And Nick says, "Well, I better tell him now because it's going to find out about it anyway." I mean, he is the straight shooter, truth telling guy. Well, as soon as he deviates from that path, he does something a little bit dishonest. That's what sets the whole film in motion, and everything goes to hell. So, which is, you don't have that sort of. There's a moral center here somewhere, even though this film is pretty wild and has lots of great twists and turns with hitmen and so on and so forth. But I just love that little centerpiece where here's a guy who really wanted the straight path. As soon as he goes off it, it all goes bad. I also like there's sort of an undercurrent of comedy. One thing, I haven't seen some of the bigger Nicolas Cage films like National Treasure, like you mentioned. Now that you've told me you'd spent 20 minutes with it. But in this film, what I love about Nicolas Cage is he does the most straight-faced comedy. He can do something where he's just got this look on his face, and he'll come out with a really great zinger, and I was really belly laughing through this film because it's not in-your-face comedic, but there are so many twists and turns that you've got to laugh. Perhaps with this scene, this is from Red Rock West. It is Nicolas Cage who has been asked to kill Lara Flynn Boyle, who he's thought to be a hitman, and he kind of falls into it. So what does the honest guy do? He goes to Lara Flynn Boyle and tells her straight out that he's been hired to kill her. Here's the scene from Red Rock West. You know the setup. Listen to where the scene goes.
You're married to a guy named Wayne, right? I don't know how to tell you this, but your husband, Wayne, he plans to have you murdered.
This is a joke, right?
I'm afraid not. Paid me to do it.
Well, what are you gonna do?
I don't know. I hate to see an innocent woman get hurt, but It's an awful lot of money.
Fix you a drink?
You seem to be taking this a lot better than I thought you would.
Have you ever been married?
What?
What's your name?
Lyle.
Have you ever been married, Lyle? Well, it does strange things to people. Suppose I double his offer and you do something for me.
What do you have in mind?
Take care of Wayne.
That's a scene from Red Rock West, and it's the dilemma of the person who doesn't want to be a hitman. He actually, gets in the position. He warns the woman, and the woman turns the tables and says, instead of being ordered by the husband to kill the wife turns around and says, look, I'll double the offer. You can kill my husband.
What's great about this, Jim, is she doesn't even bat an eye.
No.
She's just a cool customer. You know what was interesting about this film? I remember seeing this at the Red Vic in San Francisco in the early 90s, and there was no distribution deal for this film at the time.
Mm-hmm.
John Dahl was there, and he was showing it just to see if he could spark some interest. And it's amazing that I think the only problem this film ever had was no one would distribute it. I think Polygram picked it up eventually,
mm-hmm.
but John Dahl did some of the best of that slew of neo-noirs that came out in the early 90s. This and Last Seduction are great films.
And he's still working. The Ben Kingsley film called You Killed Me just came out within the last year, and this is about the hitman who has to go to AA. Anyway, my number 3 pick of a movie that I highly recommend, Nicolas Cage in Red Rock West.
And I would second that, Jimmy. I think that's a great film. And I would highly recommend to folks get out and see it. Well, drum roll if you please. This is my 4th pick. And again, it's funny, Jim. Not ha-ha funny, but funny. Is that my first 2 picks were from 1951. And my last 2 picks are from 1965. I don't know what's going on here. I guess I don't like change. But anyhow, I'm going with King Rat, based on the book by James Clavell, directed by Brian Forbes, who did the original Stepford Wives and some other really good films. This is a big-budget British film with an American star. And, of course, I'm talking about the great George Segal at the absolute top of his game. Yeah, that's right, folks. He did other stuff than that stupid show with Brooke Shields and whatnot. He was a really great big star back in the 60s. And this also features James Fox of Performance, Tom Courtenay of Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner, John Mills is in this film. Patrick O'Neill. This is a terrific movie, and what it is, it's almost unbelievable. It's a prisoner of war movie, but unlike any you've ever seen, because they're out in the middle of the jungle. It's not Bridge on the River Kwai. It's a real prison, Shangji Prison in Singapore. And what's happened is that Singapore fell, and there's 100,000 British and a handful of Americans captured, basically languishing, except for one, played by George Segal. And I think the overriding thrust of this film, Jimmy, is that in severe circumstances, a breakdown of situations and things get desperate, then we're all kind of like rats in the sense that we have to survive by whatever means necessary, and we're left to our own devices. Our moral cores are turned inside out or turned off. What do we become? And what happens here is that here's George Siegel, who in the military chain of command is the lowest rank there. He's a corporal. He's low. And yet he is doing extremely well. He's managed to figure out a way to work the system to his favor. He knows how to bargain with the Japanese. He knows how to subsist. He knows how to live well. He is basically in charge of this prisoner of war camp. His uniform is starched. His cigarettes are new. His shoes are spit-shined. He's well coiffed. He's shaven. And everyone around him is they're bedraggled. They're dying of dysentery. But yet somehow he's managed to not only survive, but thrive. And what's interesting here is that he's pretty much an amoral guy, and yet he has friends. He befriends this one upper crust British officer played by James Fox, who's actually his friend. They're very close buddies. And Tom Courtenay plays the kind of like the provost marshal, the cop. And he's out to shut him down. And here's a little clip where Tom Courtenay is about to try to take down George Siegel, King Rat, and he's backed up by his buddy, James Fox.
You're slumming, aren't you, Marlowe?
Don't be a snob, old man. Never make a good policeman if you're a snob. Everyone looks the same with the knickers down.
Where's your armband?
In my pocket, I think.
It's supposed to be on your arm. Those are orders.
They're Jap orders. We stuff those, don't we?
They're also camp orders. Put it on. What's the matter with you, Corporal?
Nothing, sir. Just recovering from the pleasure of seeing you twice in one day, sir.
Colonel Sellers has reported the theft of a gold ring.
A gold ring? Gee, that's tough, sir.
I believe you know, Colonel Sellers.
Could you describe him to me, please, sir?
You play cards with him, don't you?
Oh, that Colonel Sellers, yes. Plays cards like an English officer and a gentleman. Well, of course he would, wouldn't he, sir?
Don't press your luck too hard, Corporal. Just answer the questions. Did he ever show you the ring?
No, as far as I remember, he never even discussed marriage, sir.
I'm warning you, Corporal.
You sure you're not accusing me, sir, in front of witnesses?
Good luck, Gray.
No, I'm not accusing anybody, Corporal.
Then can I borrow your Ronson?
Ronson?
Yeah, it's in your top pocket, I think.
Thank you. Well, now, this is new, isn't it?
Yes, it was mine. We were playing poker just before lunch, and I lost it to him.
You what?
I lost it to him at poker. I had a straight, but he had better. Tell him.
Yeah, we were playing stud.
What were the cards?
His or mine?
His.
Aces on twos.
You're lying, Marlowe.
Why, Gray, old chap, what a thing to say. It was pathetic. I thought I had him by the short and curlies with a straight, like I said. So I threw in my lot. Threw in the jolly old Ronson.
How do you play stud, Marlowe?
Stud?
Yes. How's it played?
Stud? You mean ordinary stud, don't you?
Yes.
Well, we'll show you. It's nothing like a practical demo.
Yeah, you see, it was my whole card.
I said I wanted you to tell me, Marlowe.
Temper? Well, never mind. You don't need the cards to show you. 4 cards face up. You can imagine that, can't you, Gray? And 1 down. There's 1 in the hole. It's just like Happy Families, really, in the nursery.
We never had a nursery, Marlowe.
So that's my fourth pick, Jimmy. King Rat, 1965. George Segal, James Fox, Tom Courtney. Great film.
Great cat. I love all those guys. George Segal as well. Well, my final film is actually a new film. It's just getting released in the summer of 2008, and actually Bob and I had a chance to see this film. The reason I'm bringing it up is I do want to impress upon you to see the documentary A Man Named Pearl. This is about Pearl Fryer, a man who has topiaries in his backyard in South Carolina, very small town there. And what this film does is not only just treat the subject, which is fascinating because his garden has gotten national attention because he has these topiaries that look unlike anything you've ever seen, and 3 acres worth. This film is about racism. Pearl Fryer is a black man in the South and son of a sharecropper. Also the idea that your garden is art and how art affects the community. And this film just goes on and on and on, taking on the subject of this wonderful, wonderful man and his passion for his garden and the repercussions of what he is doing. Again, this film is going to be showing up in theaters in the summer of 2008. I highly recommend it. Here is a clip from A Man Named Pearl. Basically, friends, neighbors, folks at the nursery who marvel at Pearl Fryer and his garden.
He wasn't afraid to jump right in and to begin making something new. And when I say new, I mean really new. Not something that he had seen in a textbook, not something that he had seen in a museum, but something that was his and became like nothing else before.
This is a very daring undertaking for somebody with little or no experience in gardening to come out and create one of the more difficult forms of gardening. So that's what's amazing about Pearl. And once you get to know him, you can say, yeah, he could do it. I don't know if I could do it. I don't know if I would have the nerve to try to do it.
I've never seen anything like it. I'm sure that there are gardens in England and in Europe. But you've also got to imagine that this is a black man in a rural South Carolina county that did not know anything about horticulture.
I like Pearl Fryer both as an artist and as an individual. I think the reason for that is because he's truthful in both instances.
Mr. Fryer was an influence on me, more so as an adult than a child, because now I think I have a greater appreciation for the entire package. Yes, he has a beautiful garden, but to me, Mr. Fryer represents someone that has found the passion and pursues that passion, and because of that, I think good things are attracted to him, and I find that to be a beautiful thing.
That's a clip from one of my favorite documentaries of this year and maybe past years. It's called A Man Named Pearl. It's about Pearl Fryer and his topiary gardens. And, you know, Bob, I think we all need a little inspiration now and again. And I found this film to be utterly inspiring. It just made me feel great.
You know, the last words that person said, a beautiful thing, that is certainly a nice way to sum up A Man Named Pearl, because this is a film, folks, that if you're feeling in the dumps, and a lot of us are these days, this film is a ray of sunshine. It's a real rare gem, and if it's playing anywhere near you, I say run. Do not walk to your theater to see this film. It's wonderful.
So our Take 4 movies, Bob, your 4 titles?
Operation Pacific, 1951, John Wayne, Ward Bond, Patricia Neal. Flying Leathernecks, 1951, John Wayne, Robert Ryan. Spy That Came In From the Cold, 1965, Richard Burton, Oscar Werner, Peter Van Eyck, Claire Bloom, and I finished up with King Rat, 1965, George Segal, Tom Courtney, James Fox.
My 4 recommendations: Proof from Australia with Russell Crowe and Hugo Weaving. The science fiction classic from 1951, The Day the Earth Stood Still. See it before the remake later this year. Red Rock West with Dennis Hopper and Nick Cage. And the documentary A Man Named Pearl. Bob, this was great. I want to thank all of our listeners, and we will see you next time on Take 2.